Hi, I'm Justin with Direct Colors. I want to do a quick demonstration for you on our concrete dye product, followed up with a tinted sealer. Concrete dye is a great product to add accents to your floor. You could use darker dye accents, what we're going to do on this project, and then cover it with a slightly lighter shade of a tinted sealer to soften it. Tinted sealers have a little bit of a translucence to it, so you can see those dye accents through it. You can get a nice mottled effect, very artistic in application, and you get full control of how that process works. It's basically simple, a three-step process. What you're going to want to do, and you'll see us do here today, is a 3 steps really. You're going to put a single coat of our DCI water-based sealer down as a primer. This will help the concrete dye develop color faster, not soak into the concrete and disappear. So a single coat DCI water-based concrete sealer as a primer. Second step, we're going to come back, we're going to spray the concrete dye artistically, however we want to see it. And then after that sets for a while, we're going to come back and put a coat of tinted sealer over that. Tinted sealer, again, a little bit translucent, a lighter color than the dye. You'll see the accents come through. It'll be a very pretty finish. So we're going to get started first with the primer and show you what that looks like. Okay, so I want to talk about the tools that we're going to use here real quick and the product. Right here, just for a sample, I've got a piece of backer board 3x5 overlaid with a concrete overlay. In this case, it's our smooth gray. I'm going to primer seal this before we do the dye application using our DCI water-based sealer. This is a water-based acrylic, very simple application. We're going to pour it into our paint tray and we're going to apply it with a 3/8 inch nap roller. This nap roller has been defuzzed with packing tape, so I don't have to worry about any fuzz getting into our finish. So we'll go ahead and get that process started and show you what it looks like here. We're going to put just enough sealer in here to get this board sealed. It's not going to take a whole lot of material. Set this out of the way. Squeeze the excess out of the roller because we're just putting down a thin coat, nothing too heavy. Whenever I roll this on the board, I'm just going to let the weight of the applicator do the application. I'm not going to bear down on this in order to get it to bleed sealer out. I'm just going to lightly roll and let the roller apply. If I have to put a little bit of down pressure, I got to maintain the same down pressure across the whole surface. If I get various different pressures, I'm going to be releasing different amounts of sealer as I go, and that's going to show as roller lines and streaks in my finish. For the water-based sealer specifically, you got to roll a little bit slower with this material. If you go too fast, it'll put air into the sealer and you'll get little tiny bubbles everywhere. If you get to the point, like you're seeing right here, a little bit of that is just the shape of the roller is leaving different little pockets. You can roll over that until you get it. But if you're not getting coverage very good, then you know it's time to get a little bit more sealer on the roller. Squeeze out the excess again and apply. Very light, forward and back. Just going to go across this one more time. There's a few lines here and there. I'm going to try to even those out. You're going to see a little bit of lap line. As this is wet, it's milky, almost a blue tint. It will dry clear without any tint, and we should have a good even color. Some of the texture you'll see in this board is actually the overlay texture and not the sealer. Don't let that bother you. All right, so we finished up our primer seal. Nice thin coat's all that's really required for this particular application. We're going to let this sealer sit for 12 to 24 hours. Give it a good cure before we come back and we do the dye application, and that'll be what we'll show you next. Okay, we're back. We're ready to start the application with the color, which is our concrete dye. Here we're using the jet black concrete dye. This will arrive to you in a powder form. You mix it with acetone that you buy locally, and we'll send you some good instructions so you could get through that process very well. When you mix the acetone and the dye together, it needs to sit for about an hour before you start your application. For application on our project today, we're going to use a 3-gallon pump-up sprayer. It is our commercial grade sprayer, and this is what that looks like. Has a nice brass arm to it. It sprays a nice conical spray, so you get a really good atomized application in the process. Now, if you're doing smaller projects, you don't necessarily need the 3-gallon tank. As an example, I have, for samples, a little Proval sprayer here. This allows you to get just enough. We sell samples. You could put just enough down to see what this is going to look like before you move forward with your full project. And then I also have a 48-ounce sprayer from Chapin, also rated for acetone. This will do, it's good for a couple of hundred square feet. But when you get above that 200 square feet, consider getting the 3-gallon tank. It'll get you through your project quicker. You want to make sure you've got a really good amount of pressure in here so it'll help atomize the dye. So when you spray your application out, it's nice and thin. Start off your board. Okay, so the dye's coming out pretty small, atomized. I'm going to start spraying this on here in sort of a circular or a figure-8 motion just to get some irregular coverage. I don't want it to be completely even. So we're going to start kind of light and build the color however I want. Shake your applicator pretty frequently so the dye stays suspended, or else it'll just float to the bottom and you don't get a very good color laid out. So it's starting to build. We're going in a little circular pattern. I don't want it to be even. I could get a little closer if I want to do some specific dark accents to it, that's fine. If you get a little dot or a drip, you could come back and spray over those and it will diffuse them. Okay, so we're just going to let that set in. Of course, this is artistic in nature. You can lay this product down however you want. If you want to see different types of accents, that's fine. You can switch it up, change it, whatever you want to do. Artistically is up to you. Just going to darken those out a little bit. Drips, we're going to bleed them out, no problem. So that's all the dye that I'm going to put down for this application. We're going to let this sit for a couple of hours so the acetone can dry out, the acrylic in there can harden, and then we're going to come back and put a light gray tinted sealer over this. A tinted sealer's got a little translucence, so these darker accents are going to show through, and you'll have a nice kind of variated look to your finish. Okay, so we've got our concrete dye applied. We've got some nice contrast between the natural gray of the board and then where we put the black accents for the dye. Some customers would choose to leave this where it's at, pretty strong contrast, and that would be fine. You could come back and put a clear seal over this and move forward with your project. In this particular case, we're going to come back and we're going to add a little bit of a tinted sealer to sort of soften up the contrast that's going on with the board here. We want to kind of blend it out a little bit. So we're going to come back with a light gray tinted sealer. Rather than a clear sealer, we're going to use a tinted sealer. We'll get this put on in a nice thin coat. It should blend it a little bit, soften up the edges, and give us a nice look. Again, this will have a little bit of translucence to it, so you'll still see some of these dark accents, especially as this begins to cure and dry. So we'll go ahead and get started with the application of the tinted sealer over the concrete die to finish the project off. Okay, so we've got our light charcoal, water-based tinted sealer. The tools we're going to use. We've come back with another clean 3/8 inch nap roller, and then of course our paint tray. For the tinted sealer, you want to shake it up very, very well. Each bottle will be mentioned, it'll be marked to shake well. You want to make sure the pigments are very well suspended in the product. We'll pour it into the paint tray and we'll get to applying it. Okay, so I'm going to soak the roller. Here again, we're going to get enough in here to get a nice thin coat. I'm going to bleed off the excess so we don't have too much go down and get too heavy of a sealer application. And whenever I apply this, we do not want to press down to force the sealer out. We want the weight of the applicator to do the application. So you can see even now, before the sealer has a chance to dry, you can still see the accent underneath the coating. This is just going to put a nice light gray cast over the top of everything. I will come back and clean those lines up in just a moment. I just want to go ahead and get a thin coat over the whole surface first. Starting to clean up a little bit. You don't want to roll too fast, you will get bubbles in the finish. I'm going to bleed some of the excess out of this roller. Give it another pass. It's important with a water-based sealer that you always maintain a wet edge. Try not to stop in the middle of your project and come back and start again, or else you will see the join lines between where you stopped and came back and started again. Got to be careful with that. Once you get started with this material, you need to finish the job, or at least work to a control joint or to a transition area like a door frame, something like that. We're almost finished. Just smoothing out a couple of lines and we're done. We'll come back and look at this in just a few minutes after it's had an opportunity to dry. You'll see the milkiness will have disappeared and we'll just have a nice light gray cast over the overall finish. So that's pretty much what the application is like. It's a fairly simple process. You can get through it pretty quick in a day or two to finish. Ideally for an interior, if this were on an interior surface, after your sealer dried, you would get a second coat of either another coat of tint if you want more color, or you could put a clear coat over it and come back and put a few coats of wax for your finish. But this gives you a good idea of what the process is like, how simple it can be, and what kind of interesting looks you can make. We've got probably 40 different colors of dye, so you could create a lot of different color combinations to suit your interior. Thanks for joining us.